The Palestinian militants that are comprised of Hamas and the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine and the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine, including other groups, facilitated one of the most successful strikes that Israel has ever withstood in the past 50 years. As a matter of fact, on the same day, to the day of the former Yom Kippur attacks, which is insane. It's unimaginable. It's unheard of. It is not something that Hamas has ever been able to pull off ever. And there were, of course, a tremendous number of victims, civilians, on the Israeli side. And on top of that, they took hostages. I'm going to get into that in a brief moment. Good short video on the current conflict, including maps, etc. That's really interesting because I've been talking to our boy Cappy. As a matter of fact, I've been DMing him and talking to him about, like, at the very least, the military aspect of this, because from a military prowess perspective, when you just completely remove the situation from the human toll, which is, of course, going to be one of the major things that we're going to be talking about today. This is an unimaginable moment. This has never happened before. Like, this is not something that usually happens, and I'm going to try to make sense of how it happened. Obviously, I'm going to be talking about why it happened. People say it's unprecedented, and that part is actually true. It's a very unique historical moment for many different reasons. I think complacency plays a big role in it. It is a massive failure on behalf of the settler colonial apartheid state of Israel. The fact that they have a gigantic military apparatus, a gigantic surveillance apparatus, and they completely missed it. And what I'm hearing, at least from internal sources, is that the reason why they may have missed this, or at least kept the southern border, the southern border was so penetrable, and part of that reason I am hearing, and I don't know if this is correct or not, but internal messages show that the fuck up actually came from moving some of IDF's resources away from the southern wall and the southern area and into the West Bank to protect the ultra-nationalist sickos in the West Bank that have been partitioning off areas and engaging in an unjustifiable act of settler terrorism. So that was keeping a lot of the IDF's resources. So it seems like the border control was not as severe as it normally should be. Maybe they were over-reliant on their technology. These are really interesting components of the situation beyond the human toll. I have spoken on this already. I've spoken about this on Twitter, obviously. I know that there were some people who were looking to hear what I had to say about the issue, considering my support for Palestine. And of course, I am still in support of Palestine. I believe that the people of Palestine deserve emancipation, just like the people of Ukraine deserve emancipation. This is one of the most unjustifiable and unimaginable and ongoing acts of cruelty. And that cruelty, of course, is going to inevitably have some kind of blowback. This is what Israel and the Israeli citizens are currently experiencing. The unimaginable cruelty, a fraction of it being experienced. And of course, the victims, the toll is taken upon the normal citizens. I am not going to be one of those people that says, like, oh, they're settlers, they deserve the violence, No. Nobody deserves that. That is precisely the reason why I always criticize Israel. Obviously, nobody deserves that. This is, of course, going to happen. What do you think is going to happen when you have an open-air prison that you have been operating for years and years? When you bomb it, when you operate an open-air prison that you routinely bomb, that you control the water supply, that you refuse to let concrete into, that you control the fucking water line in general, that you prevent people from fishing in, that you have refused to allow to have desalination plants inside of, when 97% of the water supply is toxic, when the average age is 18. This is asymmetrical violence. We are going to learn more about it because I think that people need to understand what that looks like. Here is a good example of an Israeli left-wing Knesset member. We condemn and oppose any assault on innocent civilians, but in contrast to the Israeli government, that means we must oppose any assault on Palestinian civilians as well. We must analyze those terrible incidents, the attacks in the right context, and that is the ongoing occupation. Kassif said. We have been warning time and time again, everything is going to erupt and everyone is going to pay a price, mainly innocent civilians on both sides. And unfortunately, that is exactly what happened, he said. The Israeli government, which is a fascist government, this is true, supports, encourages, and leads pogroms against the Palestinians. Also true. There is an ethnic cleansing going on. It was obvious the writing was on the wall, written in the blood of the Palestinians, and unfortunately now Israelis as well. If you recall, when Israel was having its own constitutional crisis, one thing that I brought up, as well as many other leftists who are very familiar with Israel, have either lived in Israel or have a lot of experience with Israeli politics, said the exact same thing. They said these kinds of internal struggles are never going to end because these internal struggles are not born out of mere disagreements between different parties. These internal struggles are happening because this is happening inside an apartheid state. It's not that complex if you are aware of the situation, or, I mean, since the inception of the Israeli state, but certainly if you are aware, even at the very least since like the past 20 years, I would say, Benjamin Netanyahu is perhaps one of the worst things that could have happened to a colonial state that only increased in its brutality over the course of Benjamin Netanyahu's tenure. This is something that even Israelis inside of Israel, despite how much anger they feel towards Palestinians, also recognize. Benjamin Netanyahu has built a robust far-right network that he took advantage of and seized power once again. If you want to understand it from the perspective of like internal politics, that is your guy. He is bloodthirsty and violent and has made Israel somehow an even more bloodthirsty nation state. And now he has right-wing figures to his right, like Ben Gvir, who are causing actual collapses internally inside of Israel. However, yes, Kahanas perverts. If you're an Israeli person, if you're an Israeli citizen, if you are living in Israel and you do not recognize that those internal rifts are happening only because Israel is also an apartheid state, the spiritual damage that it causes to everyday existence, I don't know what to tell you. Said it time and time again. It's just like how white supremacy kills white people as well. This is very important. This violence will never end. I know this because I'm an American and I live in America. And I see it. Israel, obviously, due to its proximity to the violence itself, due to its closeness to the apartheid that it's currently facilitating, cannot see it. America rests on top of indigenous genocide and slavery, and yet there are racial wounds that have yet to be healed. That is the reason why we are constantly fucking ourselves, okay? Israel in its inception and at this stage is also going through that tumultuous period. So, can you explain why people like Trudeau are supporting Israel? I'm scared. What do you mean? The Western world has always been in support of Israel and will always be in support of Israel. If you want to understand the divide inside of the divide on the planet, yes, the global South for the most part global South or colonized people will oftentimes support Palestine and Palestinian liberation, and developed nation states that have engaged in colonial violence throughout their history and still continue to engage in neo-colonial violence to this day that benefit from the unequal exchange within the global South will always support Israel, both financially with military support and yeah, that's it. Here, this is what I said back, launching off of what Israeli journalist Gideon Levi said on the BBC. First, I will show you what he said. This is immediately after when the Israeli government tried to retaliate against Gazans. Here is what he said, and then I'll tell you what my perspective is again, so you understand.
Gaza is a cage. Is the biggest prison in the world. Nobody spoke about lifting the siege. And people who live now 17 years in a cage want to resist. And if they have the possibility, they do it. And I'm surprised that they had the possibility, because the barrier around Gaza, billions of dollars were spent there to build this unbelievable barrier under the surface and above the surface with all kinds of electronic devices. And finally, you see that the spirit of resistance is many times stronger than anything else, and they broke it and penetrated into Israel, which is now shocked.
This is not me saying it. It's an Israeli journalist in the BBC saying it in the immediate aftermath of a massive military operation inside of the borders of Israel that has never happened before, with many civilians dying and a ton of hostages that they took. To which I responded with, and this was still my perspective, there is no perfect retaliation to apartheid. There are only victims everywhere. One party holds all the power to end the violence, however, and it's certainly not the Palestinians living under a colonial apartheid regime that has chained them in an open-air prison it bombs routinely. And there are plenty of people who refuse to see that and say, well, you know, they really blew it. I saw a lot of people saying they really blew it. The Palestinians really blew it. The backlash is going to be so bad. They're going to end up killing a bunch of Palestinians. To them, I say, do you think this calculation is not in the minds of Palestinians? You can push humans only so far until they realize that this is their only method. They will go out on their own terms in this regard. You want to stop the violence, you want to stop the bloodshed, you have to pull back on your end, because this violence and this bloodshed is disproportional. The violence is asymmetrical. No, I do not think that Netanyahu and Mossad knew this was going to happen and let it happen. Do you want to know why? Because currently, first of all, this is a massive fuck up for them. There's already so much internal rift inside of Israel. And yes, military operations oftentimes galvanize Israelis who will say, all right, we have a security problem here and we have to do something about it. We have to go kill some Palestinians. However, this moment is a legitimate, it demonstrates the fragility of Israeli security. So many commanders died. So many special forces people died. There are hundreds of hostages now inside of Gaza. And the official leadership in Palestine said, we have these hostages specifically because whatever violence you dish out to us, they will experience. They wanted to minimize, as far as I understand, the damage that Israel could cause to Gaza. That's why they did it. That's why they took these fucking hostages and they said they placed them all around Gaza, where they said, look, you think an Israeli's life is more important than a Palestinian's life? We all know that. So go ahead, bomb us if you will, but you will be killing your own people. Now, for those of you who don't understand what this means, last time one singular Israeli military person was kidnapped by Hamas, Israel released 1,000 prisoners in that prisoner exchange. 1,000. He was one military person, because in their eyes, it's worth it. 1,000 Palestinians is worth the life of one Israeli. So now they have hundreds, and not just Israelis, but even, from what I understand, foreign nationals as well from the festival that they raided on. That is something to consider. There are forces inside of Israel that are now saying things like this: when genocide is permissible. Judging by the numbers of casualties on both sides, it's almost a 1-month-old war. I mean, this is from 2014. This is not the only person. There's another dude in the Knesset who said, we are going to do the Nakba again, and it's going to be much more violent than the former Nakba. It's going to be much worse than that. There are people internally that are baying for blood. There have been closed door meetings inside of Israel. People are calling this sort of good military overview, but I can't say for sure. Okay, hold on. We'll look at the military overview in a second. But there have been closed door meetings where the most far right elements are literally saying, we'll kill our own hostages. It doesn't matter. We'll kill our own hostages if we have to. It doesn't fucking matter. Now, if you do that, it's over for Israel. If you kill Israeli citizens that were taken hostage inside of Gaza with Israeli bombs, Israel as a nation state will collapse. 1,000,000%. Right now, there are way too many far-right forces inside of the Israeli government, and plenty of people fucking despise them for understandable reasons. This is my speculation. If the ultra-nationalist forces are able to literally wipe out the entirety of Gaza and kill hundreds of Israeli hostages in that situation, Israel internally already is a powder keg. There will be mass protests. There will be mass protests internally inside of Israel. Remember, they did a prisoner swap for one prisoner, and they released 1,000 Palestinians from prison for one Israeli military person. Now they have hundreds. Why haven't they immediately wiped out the entirety of Gaza? They're bombing Gaza. The bombing campaign has been more ruthless and more brutal than in prior years. However, it's not new. If you're in Gaza, they fucking bomb you all day, every day. Yeah, it must be emphasized that armed struggle by Palestinian resistance against the occupier is legal under international law. This is from the UN General Assembly, Resolution 3743, adopted in 1982. There is no ambiguity about it. It reaffirms the legitimacy of the struggle of peoples for independence, territorial integrity, national unity, and liberation from colonial and foreign domination and foreign occupation by all available means, including armed struggle. This is why the Human Rights Watch calling Israel openly an apartheid state is actually legitimately terrifying for Israel, and that's precisely why they've been doing counter propaganda against it non-fucking stop. Because once the NGOs start openly stating the situation, okay, start openly fucking addressing what is going on with a shred of honesty, all of a sudden there is more legitimacy to the counter struggle. Think about it. The Human Rights Watch, Amnesty calling Israel an apartheid state. That is genuinely important. It's genuinely important because that all of a sudden reframes every single violent retaliation in a way that has never been reframed in the Western media. The UN still won't do shit? Yeah, of course, UN is feckless, but even if you are an institutionalist, there is literally legal legitimacy to these actions. What is necessary in the circumstance is it's to understand how we got here. Everybody fucking understands it's evil, okay? Everybody understands it's evil. It's a military apparatus with no like clear direction. They've never been able to get this level of, yeah, I know, Elent News, they did hurt people. I know. I didn't say that they didn't hurt people. I'm literally explaining they did. They fucking hurt me. They killed people. They killed so many fucking people. But what you must recognize is that everybody understands dead civilians is bad. I of course. But what is important to recognize here is how we got here. The historical reasons as to why this is happening. Because many people look at that situation and go, oh, it's because they're like anti-Semitic. They're anti-Semitic. They just want to kill all the Jews. They want to kill all the Jews. And there's certainly people in Hamas that want that. 100%. Except the reality of the situation is that that is not the only reason, and not even a major reason in this point, because they are living under colonial rule. This is an open air prison. It does not make it right, sure, but you're ridiculous if you don't understand how that's happening or why that's happening. Might be my worst take yet. Yeah. Well, you must be new here if you think that me talking about Palestine is a bad take that's new. No, this is my worst take since the jump, I think. Here is the map of events in the Gaza Strip. In this thread, main points and some developments from an OSIN analyst. Hamas attacked on a wide front, quickly overran the Israeli border defenses in multiple areas. They advanced into multiple border towns. They engaged in a barrage of missile fire, and while the missiles were landing inside of Israel, they also literally fucking paraglid over the fence, over the supposed smart fencing system that they have on this entire area. Fighting in Sderot, where Sderot Night Cinema exists, by the way. For those of you who don't know, they used to have on the hilltops of Sderot, they would put up fucking chairs and watch Gaza get bombed. They call it Sderot Cinema. So just, that's another thing to remember. They immediately took over military checkpoints. They took over the major checkpoint that they went into the military bases. They started taking prisoners. They started killing all of the fucking IDF. There's like footage of them trying to put their gear on and getting slaughtered. Like they literally got caught with their pants down pretty much. It was a massacre. It was brutal. And that part is also military on militant action. So that's a little bit different than fighting against civilians and like ripping them to shreds. So in addition to the map above, Hamas conducted sea operations and reportedly landed their smaller units in the direction of the city of Ashkelon. Also claims of Hamas forces crossing the border in the southern Gaza area surface, but I haven't been able to confirm those yet. Israeli forces at the border were surprised and in some occasions had almost no time to react. The likely reason for this is the immense failure of the Israeli intelligence or failure of politicians and officials to react to intel reports. Deception by Hamas played a role too. Remember, Israel's surveillance apparatus is so good, supposedly, that they sell it to the rest of the world. It's so good that the FBI and CIA have told Israel time and time again, hey, this is too good. You can't use this anymore. It's kind of fucked up. So they have like insane spyware that they're selling everywhere, and they fucking forgot to use it on their own backyard, I guess. Israel's Air Force and Navy were capable of starting countermeasures already in the first hours of the attack. Israel's ground forces seem to have been comparatively slower in their response. However, according to the latest reports, they've started a series of counterattacks. Hamas does not have the capabilities for prolonged offensives. A long-term military success is unlikely, especially outside the Gaza Strip. Most likely, Hamas will not be able to defend and hold conquered territories against the Israeli Defense Forces for so long. Except this was 21 hours ago, and as far as I understand, they still have certain military checkpoints and certain police precincts right now as we speak. which is fucking insane. I need you to understand something. Inside of Gaza, every single item that goes into Gaza is controlled by Israel. This does not mean that there is obviously still explosive ordnance and things of that nature that sneak in, but you have to understand that Israel has complete control of what the fuck is going on in Gaza. Okay, there's only two ways to get into Gaza. One on the Israeli side and one on the Egyptian side. Neither side is controlled by the Palestinians. Israel even controls Gaza's electricity, which they've shut down, which is, by the way, another violation of human rights because there's 2 million people living on this strip of land. 2 million Palestinians. Israel also controls Gaza's water supply. 97% of the water in Gaza is toxic. 97% of the water is toxic. Many of the issues that people experience in Gaza is due to the fact that they do not have access to clean water. Where are they getting their arms and funds from? Hezbollah on the Lebanon side and Iran. Iran is giving them weapons and training, and most likely Hezbollah, which is also, Iran backed. New York Times published that Iran organized the attack. Very interesting that you say that. Now, many people speculate that it is actually Iranian backed. However, at least as far as I saw last night, the official State Department line on this was that there was no connection, which made this even crazier. There was no connection between Iran and this line of attack. Normally, it is. It's usually the point is that yes, it is. Don't know why they're doing that. I don't know why they're saying that it wasn't Iran. I don't know why the State Department is saying that. I think maybe they're saying that because they gave $6 billion of Iranian money that was frozen in Korea. Recently, they signed off on that $6 billion going back into Iran, which hasn't even reached Iranian hands yet, by the way. So there's some propaganda on that front as well. But probably maybe to cover their own bases, they're saying that. What was the point of them attacking the music festival? I'm pro-Palestine, but that's going to make them lose a lot of support internationally. Brother, I can't begin to explain this to you, okay? They don't give a fuck. They don't care. They have nothing. I hope you understand. They care about getting hostages so that they can have leverage. That's all they care about. It's like, I don't know how to explain this to you because, like, what support do they get from the West anyway? What international support do they get? Those who will support Palestinian liberation will support Palestinian liberation and will be called anti-Semites, will be called fucking terrorist supporters, as you are seeing in the chat already. And those who do not, or those who at least, like, aesthetically claim that they want Palestinians to, like, live and they're human beings who deserve a life of dignity, but then turn heel immediately when they say, well, this time is too far. I think Gaza is going to get wiped out and it's actually Hamas's fault. Well, then those guys weren't fully invested in this anyway. And another thing that I need you to understand is this. BDS, boycott, divestments, and sanctions on the state of Israel is a peaceful movement, a peaceful act of resistance. This movement started in apartheid South Africa, against apartheid South Africa. Do you understand? And it was actually very instrumental in at least pushing the American government to, and other Western governments, to stop supporting apartheid South African businesses. BDS against Israel is illegal in 35 states. 35 states. Sanctions do not work against enemies. Sanctions do not work against governments that have already designed their entire existence against sanctions that are inevitable. Sanctions, however, do work for your allies. Something I've said time and time again. Sanctions would work on Israel. By the way, the asymmetry of violence that the Palestinian withstands on a fucking daily basis is never more apparent than whenever people try to defend Israel and they literally use Israel's actions against Palestinians as agitative propaganda to say, look, this is what the Palestinians are doing to Israelis right now. Here it is. Orthodox Kanana says, alleged footage of Hamas keeping children in cages. Why? What purpose does this serve? Are they Israeli hostages? Correction. They are Palestinian children being held in cages by Israeli law enforcement and army officials. Same thing happened with Jamie Lee Curtis, who, again, this is, and by the way, there are some people who are like not psychotic, bloodthirsty fascists who just want to wipe out the entire Palestinian population. But here it is. Jamie Lee Curtis, obsessed with Jamie Lee Curtis posting a photo of Palestinian children in Gaza being terrorized by Israel as a way to show support for Israel. Y'all can't even be wrong right. Jamie Lee Curtis goes, terror from the skies. Yeah, terror from the skies is right. It is the Israeli military bombing Gaza in that situation. I mean, this is also the other reason. Mahmoud Abbas has been the most moderate Palestinian leader in history. This is why Palestinians don't like him. His narrative focused on how Palestinians should focus on diplomacy, not war. America and Israel have thwarted every Palestinian diplomatic move. Abbas has not been able to present the people with any wins. He focused on internal institutions, diplomacy, security, coordination with Israelis, and literally the Palestinians, not because they're fucking anti-Semitic and think that Abbas is like working with Israel, which means he's like a part of the shadow government or whatever, saw that despite his greatest efforts of coordinating with Israeli authorities, they lost the land. Their people were displaced. They had to go through more checkpoints. They had to fucking withstand more armed and more violent settlers. They had to withstand more violence every single time they wanted to demonstrate, okay? So please, whenever you say, oh my God, dude, oh my God, what the fuck are you talking about? We got to do diplomacy. We got to do diplomacy. That's the diplomatic outlook. You are not representing the interests of Palestinians, nor are you even analyzing it with any kind of seriousness. You are looking at it from a perfectly idealistic perspective that does not happen in the real world. Obviously, no person is like, oh man, it's perfectly valid to kill civilians, okay? It's not. But if you want the violence to end, which I do, okay, you have to end the apartheid. Do you get it?